I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day and the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Go to Sleep with Me. As you heard, this week's episode is What a Wonderful World, and before I sing the whole song, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of What a Wonderful World, but also about the composer, because I think his history is a little interesting too. So hopefully you'll be able to relax and listen and learn something new, and then at the end, I'll sing the song all the way through. What a Wonderful World is a jazz song written by producer Bob Thiel as George Douglas and composer and performer George David Weiss. One source claims the song was first offered to Tony Bennett, who turned it down, although Louis Armstrong biographer Ricky Riccardi disputes this claim. George Weiss recounts in the book Off the Record, Songwriters and Songwriting by Graham Nash that he wrote the song specifically for Louis Armstrong. Weiss was inspired by Armstrong's ability to bring people of different races together. Because he was gigging at the Tropicana Hotel, Armstrong recorded the song in Las Vegas at Bill Porter's United Recording Studio. The session was scheduled to follow Armstrong's midnight show, and by 2 a.m. the musicians were settled and tape was rolling. Arranger Artie Butler was there with songwriters Weiss and Thiel, and Armstrong was in the studio singing with the orchestra. Armstrong had recently signed to ABC Records, and ABC president Larry Newton showed up to photograph Armstrong. Newton wanted a swingy pop song like Hello Dolly, a big hit for Armstrong when he was with Cap Records. So when Newton heard the slow pace of What a Wonderful World, he tried to stop the session. Newton was locked out of the studio for his disruption, but a second problem arose. Nearby freight train whistles interrupted the session twice, forcing the recording to start over. Armstrong shook his head and laughed off the distractions, keeping his composure. The session ended around 6 a.m., going longer than expected. To make sure the orchestra members were paid extra for their overtime, Armstrong accepted only $250 musicians' union scale for his work. I just want to take a minute and repeat that. Armstrong accepted only $250 musicians' union scale for his work. The song was not initially a hit in the United States, where it sold fewer than 1,000 copies because Newton did not like or promote it, but was a major success in the United Kingdom, reaching number 1 in the UK singles chart. In the United States, the song hit number 16 on the Billboard Bubbling Under chart. It was also the biggest selling single of 1968 in the UK, where it was among the last pop singles issued by HMV Records before becoming an exclusive classical music label. The song made Armstrong the oldest male to top the UK singles chart. Armstrong's record was broken in 2009. when a remake of Islands in the Stream, recorded for Comic Relief, which included the 68-year-old Tom Jones, reached number 1 on the chart. Tony Bennett did go on to record What a Wonderful World several times, as in 2003 with Katie Lang, paying homage to Bennett's friend Armstrong. ABC Records' European distributor, EMI, forced ABC to issue a What a Wonderful World album in 1968. It did not chart in the United States due to ABC not promoting it, but charted in the UK, where it was issued by Stateside Records with catalog number SSL 10247 and peaked on the British chart at number 37. The song gradually became something of a standard and reached a new level of popularity. In 1978, it was featured in the closing scenes of BBC Radio's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and was repeated for BBC's 1981 TV adaptation of the series. In 1988, Armstrong's recording appeared in the film Good Morning Vietnam, despite the film being set in 1965, 2 years before it was recorded, and was re-released as a single, hitting number 32 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in February 1988. The single charted at number 1 for the fortnight ending June 27, 1988, on the Australian chart. It is also the closing song for the 1995 movie 12 Monkeys. By April 2014, Louis Armstrong's 1967 recording had sold 2,173,000 downloads in the United States after it was released digitally. Next, I want to talk about the 2 composers who wrote What a Wonderful World. I'll start with Bob Thiele. Bob Thiele was born in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, New York, on July 27, 1922. He hosted a jazz radio show when he was 14. He also played clarinet and led a band in the New York area. At 17, he founded the Signature Records label and recorded many jazz greats, including Lester Young, Errol Gardner, and in 1943, Coleman Hawkins. Signature folded in 1948, and he joined Decca Records in 1952, running its Carol Records subsidiary. His wife was the singer Teresa Brewer, who he met and produced while working for Decca Records in the 1950s. He took over as head of Impulse Records from 1961 to 1969 after founder Creed Taylor left to run Verve Records. Thiele's best-known association while at Impulse was with John Coltrane, but he also recorded such artists as Charles Mingus, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Rollins, Archie Shepp, and Albert Ayler, among others. His most successful hit song was, of course, Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. What a Wonderful World was credited to George Douglas or Stanley Clayton. These are pseudonyms Thiele used, made from the names of his uncles, Stanley, Clayton, George, and Douglas. In the late 1960s, Thiele was often brought in to produce artists in the company's Bluesway Records label. He produced the albums that graduated B.B. King towards the mainstream, including Lucille in 1967. He also produced Bluesway recordings by John Lee Hooker, T-Bone Walker, and others. After 7 years with ABC Records, the parent of Impulse, Thiele formed his own company, Flying Dutchman Productions, in 1968. Thiele later formed his own record label, Flying Dutchman Records, which is now part of Sony Music Entertainment. Later in his career, Thiele formed Dr. Jazz Records in 1983 and Red Baron Records in 1991, which released a number of albums on compact disc, including 3 by Bob Thiele Collective, each a different all-star group which Thiele himself assembled and produced. In 1995, he released a memoir titled What a Wonderful World. Next, I want to talk about What a Wonderful World's co-writer, George David Weiss. Weiss was born in a Jewish family and originally planned a career as a lawyer or accountant, but out of a love for music, he was led to attend the Juilliard School of Music, developing his skills writing and arranging. After leaving school, he became an arranger for such big bands as those of Stan Keaton, Vincent Lopez, and Johnny Richards. He was a very prolific songwriter during the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s, with many of his songs attaining high rankings on the charts. Although he worked with many collaborators, the largest proportion of his well-known songs were written with Benny Benjamin. Weiss contributed to a number of film scores: Murder, Inc. in 1960, Gidget Goes to Rome in 1963, Mediterranean Holiday in 1964, and Mademoiselle in 1966. Collaborations on 3 Broadway musicals were among his compositions. Mr. Wonderful was written in 1956 with Jerry Bach and Larry Holofcener. The Broadway production starred Sammy Davis Jr. First Impressions was based on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. It was written in 1959 with Bo Goldman and Glenn Paxton. Maggie Flynn was written in 1968 with Hugo Peretti and Luigi Creatore. It was set in New York during the American Civil War, and the Broadway production starred Shirley Jones and Jack Cassidy. In addition, Weiss and Will Severin composed the family musical A Tale of Cinderella, which was first presented in December 1994 at the Theater Institute in Troy, New York, and filmed for presentation on PBS. Weiss wrote the lyrics for the jazz standards Lullaby of Birdland, which became a huge hit for Ella Fitzgerald. In 1984, Weiss was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. In 2006, a court settlement was reached regarding royalties for the worldwide rights of the song The Lion Sleeps Tonight, best known as a #1 hit for the Tokens, which was based on a 1939 song, Mbube, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, by the South African musician Solomon Linda. Some notable songs that Weiss wrote are Lullaby of Birdland in 1952, Mr. Wonderful in 1955, The Lion Sleeps Tonight in 1961, Can't Help Falling in Love in 1961, That Sunday, That Summer in 1963, Stay With Me in 1966, What a Wonderful World in 1968, and Let's Put It All Together. Well, that's What a Wonderful World. I hope you learned something interesting, and I'm going to sing the song all the way through. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day and the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn so much more than I will ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself.